Are there animals that truly create music? Well, it doesn't seem right to me that I can't eat delicious cheeseburgers. I mean, I just like to tell vegans to kill their cats, so. How could we imagine that there's any sort of actual experience going on in the mind of an animal like that?
Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. Thank you all for your comments in the last one. As I said, for those of you who don't know, I'm changing the format of the videos that I'm doing. I'm no longer doing fast-paced zooming in, zooming out, editing in, editing out type of videos. I much rather prefer sitting down like this and discussing ideas with you in a way that you can either listen to while driving or doing something at home, or just sitting down and having a coffee and enjoy the video. So today we're going to be talking about a podcast episode that I saw, well, kind of a podcast episode that I saw on Cosmic Skeptic's channel. For those of you who don't know Cosmic Skeptic, Alex O'Connor was a vegan and up until a few months ago when he made this community post sharing that he's no longer vegan due to some medical condition that he has. That's something that I can talk about maybe in another video. I do intend to make a video on that, so I will be doing that soon as well. And he is a very big YouTuber, relatively speaking. He has hundreds of thousands of followers, and he's quite known in the both philosophical and the atheist subject-related YouTube world. So he has a new type of podcast, let's say, that he is running on his channel recently, once a week, if I'm not mistaken, where he brings on guests and he discusses different ideas. And today's guest was Destiny. Destiny is a very famous streamer, and I've already seen it. And I want you all to thank me, because this is going to be the second time I'm going to sit through this. We're going to be going through what Destiny believes when it comes to other animals and why he doesn't take them into consideration when it comes to morality. What I was surprised, and you're going to see, is that Cosmic Skeptic, Alex, was really pushing him to make him realize, like, you don't really make sense. He cornered him many times, but for some reason, Destiny seems to be quite stubborn on this topic. I've seen a few other videos of him, and even in this video, as long as the topic was not about other animals, he was very chill, very reasonable. I mean, in the way where he was open to listening anything Alex wanted to share. But the second they switched the subject to animals and animal rights, he completely changed, which I personally believe is kind of childish. But anyway, I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Let's go through this.
Since you brought it up, I wanted to ask, while I still have you, what do you got against animals, man?
Well, they taste really good. Isn't that what meat eaters say?
That is what they say, and I don't think any vegan would ever deny that. I mean, I guess since we're doing sort of meta ethics, regardless of whether or not you're going to be a vegan, I've heard you say that if there is such thing as moral consideration or moral worth, it just is something that sort of doesn't apply to non-human animals.
Yeah, that basically, I feel like you can start from one of 2 points. You can either say,
I mean, what I find weird is, as you saw, the second he asked that, he switched to making a joke. And not only that, he kind of also starts acting weird. I don't know. I probably didn't pay much attention to the beginning of the podcast because I was listening to it, not really watching. But he starts like moving a lot. I think he's already not comfortable with the fact that they're going to be discussing animal rights.
I value human sentience, and that's where I begin all of my moral construction from. Or you can just say that, like, I value all sentience, and that's where vegans typically begin their construction from. I don't think there's necessarily a good argument for one or the other, because I view these as being very foundational statements, and being a little ethical anti-realist means I can pick whatever one makes me feel better. So yeah, I don't know.
I can pick whatever makes me feel better. Can you imagine what kind of a messy world we'd be living in if everyone just picked whatever made them feel better?
Yeah, that's basically where I'm.
And what is it that you happen to value?
The human sentience, basically.
Can you just like define human sentience?
That the human brain seems to produce some conscious experience that I would call a human conscious experience. Yeah.
Okay, is that true of all human beings?
Probably not. I could imagine somebody having enough of their brain removed such that they don't have that experience anymore. It's probably possible.
But like, would you still sort of value their sentience insofar as they have it, just because they're human beings?
No, if they're not having a human conscious experience, probably not.
So you've got kind of two necessary conditions here. one is sentience, the other is being a human. You sort of need both in order for you to.
Well, I say human sentience, essentially. Yeah. Do you have a human conscious experience, and do you have the ability to deploy said experience? Those are like the two things I say that give you like give you worthy or make you worthy of moral consideration.
All right, so he values this mix of being a human and also having sentience.
Because the problem that I have with your view is that it's sort of like an on-off switch, right? You've got like this care for human being.
I mean, we do have to keep in mind that based on what he has just said so far, he wouldn't consider it immoral to torture a dog because the dog is not a human. The dog may have sentience, but as long as the dog is not a human, you can do whatever you want.
Is it just like there's just nothing, or is it sort of like, well, they have moral worth, they just have significantly less, or in your view, is it just like these are sort of inanimate objects that you can do with as you please?
Yeah, they're basically philosophical zombies to me, I guess. Yeah.
All right, so Destiny believes that if you're not a human who is experiencing sentience and consciousness, then you are considered a philosophical zombie, and it's completely morally acceptable to do whatever you want with you.
Is that true of every animal that isn't a human being? So like chimpanzees, dolphins?
Yes. I could imagine there might be some animal of different sophistication somewhere in the universe or an undiscovered one on the planet Earth. But insofar as animals on the planet go, yeah.
So it's about sophistication?
Or something like there could be like other types of animals in the universe that have like a conscious experience, I guess, that is similar enough to like a human being or something.
How do you even know what is a conscious experience that is similar to that of a human being? There's nothing to measure that. We know sentience can be similar because you can actually observe the nervous system and everything and see how different animals are reacting to different experiences, but it's not the same with consciousness. You know, you can meet some alien species that is probably way more sentient and conscious and aware than you, but you're not going to be able to know if they are experiencing the same type of consciousness and sentience as you, and you think it's completely fine to do whatever you want to them.
But I mean, there were a time when there were different human beings simultaneously, different species of human beings simultaneously walking around on planet Earth that I believe at least some of them could, breed with each other. It's not entirely clear. Like, for example, let's go back to when you have Neanderthals, you have Homo erectus, you have a bunch of different human species all walking around on the planet. Like, are you okay with factory farming those human beings? Is it specifically Homo sapiens that you care about? Is it human beings broadly? Is it like, I mean, what is it that you're sort of basing this distinctive on switch for morality upon?
I don't know, somewhere around human conscious experience. It's not going to be very satisfying. I don't know exactly if there were other types of humans that walk the earth. I think it would be pretty difficult to do it. But I don't think that a vegan justification of saying like, well, we ought to value all sentience. I mean, I feel like that's about as arbitrary. Like, why value the sentience of animals over like the existence of nature? Why not?
Why value the sentience of other animals over the existence of nature? First of all, no one claimed that. No animal rights activist has ever claimed that we should value like this over that, because we don't have that dichotomy here. We don't even have to take that into consideration. We can just value the sentience of other animals simply because we understand what sentience is, and we understand what harming someone is, and we understand what basic moral rights are. And we got to a point in history where we decided to grant human beings these basic moral rights based on, for example, sentience and consciousness. And if you look at other animals, they are very different from us. There are a lot of differences between humans and other animals, but not in morally relevant ways, which is basically the same idea as human rights. When you believe in human rights, you don't believe that every single human is the same. You accept that they are different, but you also accept that the differences are morally irrelevant differences. They don't hold any moral weight. That's the same case with other animals. The second you start believing in human rights is the moment you also accept the logic to be extended to animal rights, except if you can point out a specific morally relevant point. And because they are other animals, or because they are not humans, is not a morally relevant point. That's called an arbitrary claim in philosophy, and it's never taken seriously simply because it's an arbitrary claim. It's also what's considered a biological truth. You're just naming a biological truth. But biological truth should never be used as a justification to discriminate someone and not give them basic moral rights, because the second we do that is the moment you accept that biological truths, such as skin color, eye color, hair type, or anything, can actually justify discrimination.
The grand, beautiful structure of a tree versus like the sentient mind of like an animal, why ought one be valued over another? I feel like fundamentally it's all kind of a bit arbitrary, so.
All right, so another thing is that he's talking about the tree versus the animal. You know, he already believes that sentience has some kind of value, because he's not saying just human being, he's also saying a human being who has sentience. Well, the other animal also has sentience, all right? The tree doesn't. Now, trees and plants are very intelligent beings. There's no doubt about that. Science has proven that. But science has also proven that intelligence does not equate sentience. Being intelligent is completely different than actually being sentient. And we can respect trees and nature and plants, but we cannot possibly claim that they have the same moral value or more than other animals. Now, even if we did do that, let's remember that a plant-based diet consumes up to 13 or 14 times less plants than a non-vegan diet, simply because a non-vegan diet would require feeding 60 or 70 billion land animals a lot of plants before they end up getting slaughtered.
Potentially, but surely sort of valuing the sentience of a non-human is much closer to valuing the sentience of a human than it is to valuing something like the existence of nature. They're much closer to each other. And so if I speak to someone like you who says, well, I actually do have this intuition that human beings matter, and I say, why is that? And you say, because they have this thing called human sentience. And I say, well, there's this thing that other animals have that's a bit like that, which would be like animal sentience, which I think maybe should count too. And you say, well, that's arbitrary, because why don't I care about, nature and the trees? I'm like, well, that's wildly different to the thing that we're talking about. I'm saying that there's something that seems very similar to what's going on in the human brain, in other human brains. And in fact, again, on an evolutionary trajectory, it wouldn't really make sense to say that the consciousness that evolved in human beings is just of a completely different kind and quality to the consciousness that evolved in other animals. Like, that just sort of doesn't make evolutionary sense.
I mean, we can say it doesn't make evolutionary sense, but I mean, like, if you look at the progress of humans on the planet, it is distinctly unique compared to every other species on Earth, right? Nobody's even close to anything. I don't think any other creatures even really have developed language or the capacity.
I mean, at this point, it's like, why would he try so bad to say these things? You don't even think that other animals have developed language the way we have? Like, of course, they do not communicate ideas that humans communicate, but they have language. They communicate. We know that. In fact, some animals can communicate in ways humans can't, from kilometers away. So why does that even matter?
For language like humans have. Some things can use crude words to describe things, but in terms of like being able to imagine things that are not, being able to express a negative, like these are...
The ability to abstract is often pointed as one of the...
I mean, that put aside, we can also talk about the argument for marginal cases. What if we have the case of a human who, for some reason, such as like a mental disability, does not have the capability to use language or share ideas or abstract ideas or things that don't exist? Does that human now lose their basic moral right?
But then I can also appeal to intuition. It's like, well, every single animal on the planet like tortures and eats other animals. And intuitively, I guess like we also kind of torture, maybe not torture, or I guess we could if you argue factor farming.
Well, other animals don't do what they do, like they don't torture on purpose. They want to eat the animal out of survival. Very, very few species can actually do harm with intention. Very few species, like cats, for example, can harm wild animals and then kill them for what we think is just fun. That's why they do it. But that's also just an appeal to nature fallacy. I don't know why that even matters here.
For example, dogs rely on their sense of smell, and most people accept that dogs experience smell far more acutely and intensely than we're capable of even imagining. And we think that's probably because of the way that they've evolved, they're more reliant upon it. Okay, hawks experience eyesight far more intensely and acutely than we're capable of even imagining because they rely more heavily upon it to navigate the world. If we are these sort of hyper-rational agents that have developed language and we can talk to each other, we don't need to rely on our sensations of pain as much to navigate the world. So who's to say that these animals, when they experience that pain, don't experience that pain in a much more acute and intense manner than we're capable of imagining, in the same way that they experience smell and eyesight in that way. Now, I don't know that that's the case.
Yeah, and like I'm saying, I would say like it's possible, but like we can't even imagine other people's minds. How could we imagine that there's any sort of actual experience going on in the mind of an animal like that?
Yeah, but
There is. How can we imagine that there's any type of experience going on in an animal's mind? How can we? We don't need to imagine. It's something that we can observe. There's a reason why there's an actual declaration of the consciousness and sentience of other animals. It's because you can observe that.
you care about other humans, but you don't care about the pigs, right?
Sure,
So in the
but I
same
only
way,
care about
yeah,
other
yeah.
humans because I see that we have the same structure, and thus, like, some conscious experience is obviously arising, I would hope, from a similar structure. But for animals whose brains seem to have markedly different capabilities than us, I don't know if I'm to believe, or I'm just supposed to take it on probability that I guess they're probably deploying a similar conscious experience. But
Well, we know for a fact that they're experiencing pain, but the possibility that they might be experiencing even more pain for the reasons that Alex shared, that's even if it's a possibility, that's a massive reason to be even more careful with what we're doing to these sentient creatures.
completely,
Would you say the same thing about like eyesight or hearing? Like, do you think that like the eyes of a chimpanzee experience the world like radically differently to the way that human beings do? Or,
I think
like,
there's
it seems to me that like I would imagine that chimpanzee ears probably work in roughly the same way, eyes work in roughly the same way. Maybe they can sort of perceive a slightly varied set of wavelengths or something, but the physical experience is probably roughly the same. I see no reason to exclude physical pain from that same comparison.
I have no idea. I feel like there's a temptation to say that they must perceive sense data like us in terms of like visuals and in terms of auditory stuff. It's tempting to say that, but I don't know if there's like a compelling rational reason why you ought to accept that.
I also don't understand why they have to be like us. Like, why does someone else have to resemble us so much for us to respect them as sentient creatures who are also experiencing life on this earth? Why would you want that weird criteria? And where do you draw the line? What if someone said, well, this human being is not close enough to me because of the color of their skin, and therefore I won't take them into consideration? Like, what makes you decide that you are the default that gives other creatures basic moral rights and that gives them also the right to be taken into consideration when it comes to morality?
Well, yeah, but we're not talking about an eye or an ear. We're talking about sight and sound, right? And those are things that happen within the mind, right? Regardless of the development of the organ itself. So to, I'm sure we have a similar organ that is perceiving light in a certain way. I shouldn't even say perception of light, that light hits it in a certain way, and it has the capability to focus and unfocus on things. But is the experience that it produces in the mind the same? I'm not sure. Are there animals, for instance?
All right, so I get the point that he's sharing, that it's not only about having the ability to observe something, but what happens in your brain once you're able to observe. But then again, we can bring up the argument for marginal cases. What about someone does not have the ability to have that? What about someone who's blind and does not have sight? Like, they can't do anything with that. Like, where do you draw the line? Who decides these things? And why do you think these things are important enough to decide someone else having basic moral rights?
Sense that, are there animals that truly create music, for instance? That would be like
So I cannot create music. Like, this is the dumbest argument anyone has ever given. I can't believe people actually say that. I can't believe Destiny, out of all people, actually thinks this is something okay to say. This is very similar to when people say, can a cow fly to the moon? Can a chicken draw the Mona Lisa? Can you? Like, what kind of weird factor are you using to decide whether or not someone has moral worth? I mean, what if someone has very low IQ levels? Is that the trait that gives them or not the right to have basic moral rights? It's mind-blowing that he thinks this is okay to say.
A big sound thing. Now I know we've got birds that kind of like sing songs, but like, are they truly creating like music, or is this like a heavily instinctual thing where it produces certain songs because it knows it'll get a mate? Like that would be, for instance, a thing of like, oh, well, here's like an auditory experience that must be similar to ours.
Something else I want to say, someone can say like, yeah, maybe not all humans can, make music or draw the Mona Lisa or fly to the moon. But it's the fact that the human species can do that, right? As a species, we may have the ability to do that. But then if you actually look into that argument, that's still a very arbitrary argument, because the only reason the human species can do that is because they are humans. So you're basing the moral worth argument on the fact that is because they are humans, which is an arbitrary claim. Like X is X because Y. Doesn't really matter. That's just not an argument.
When we're talking about the development of physical pain, which seems in almost all cases to have evolved as a way of saying this is dangerous, this is harmful for you, so we're going to give you a negative experience that you would rather not be happening, so that the organism avoids that, or gets away from it then and avoids it in future. That is why we think pain evolved. That's why we think pain receptors exist, and why we think that sort of human beings are capable of having experiences that they'd rather not have. There is no reason to think that the same thing is not true of other animals, especially when we share an evolutionary trajectory. That I just don't see a tenable way to suggest that other animals that have brains that light up when you do things to them, and they react in similar ways, and they scream out in pain, and they try to run away. And I recognize that, a plant can grow towards the sun, this kind of thing. But we're ticking so many of the boxes here that I think at the very least, it shouldn't be on me to prove that animals do feel pain before we say we can do whatever we like to them. I think it should be on you to prove that they can't before we start doing that.
Well, but I mean, like, that's the thing, though, is that neither of us can ever prove one or the other.
What do you mean you can't prove that animals feel pain? Like, it blows my mind. Let's look at the most basic science that we have on this, like the most classical one, like a quote from Darwin about our relationship to animals. He said, "There is no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals in their mental faculties. The difference in mind between man and the higher animals, great as it is, certainly is one of degree, not of kind." This is Darwin, all right? Now, a few years ago, there was actually a declaration on consciousness of other animals. July 2012, a group of prominent scientists from around the world came together to sign a declaration in which they confirmed that the evidence indicates that many types of non-human animals have the capacity for consciousness. In the declaration, they said, and I quote, "Convergent evidence indicates that non-human animals have the neuroanatomical, neurochemical, and neurophysiological substrates of conscious states, along with the capacity to exhibit intentional behaviors. Consequently, the weight of evidence indicates that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. Non-human animals, including all mammals and birds and many other creatures, including octopuses, also possess these neurological substrates." Now, this was 11 years ago, the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness. You can look it up. This is what all the science says, and then you have this guy saying that, oh, we can't really measure that. Like, it's not even, we don't even have to anymore, because we know they experience consciousness. We know they experience sentience. The stance that he's holding is very similar to the French philosopher's stance, René Descartes. Now, proponents of Cartesianism, which is the philosophy that followed the work of René Descartes, they didn't think that other animals are less sentient or, less conscious than humans. They thought that they have no consciousness and no sentience whatsoever. And you know what they did because of that? Because they looked at other animals as objects, they used to nail dogs to boards and torture them. And all the sounds that dogs used to make that showed that they are actually suffering, they claim that these sounds are merely mechanical. It's like a clock that is ticking. That is the conclusion that you get to when you hold such views, when you're like, oh, well, the dog is making these sounds, but we don't really know what's happening in the dog's consciousness. Like, how is the dog perceiving pain? You can very clearly see how these animals are perceiving pain. You can very clearly see how they're trying to get away from pain. You can see that they don't want the pain. You can see that the pain is harming them. And they are showing you that. They are reacting to it the same way that humans do. All right? And that is why, even though we have a lot of differences between humans and other animals, not a single one of these differences is considered a morally relevant difference.
I think it's tempting to say that they must have an experience similar to ours when it comes to pain because of some outward things that we see.
Tempting to say, like this guy could literally, I don't know, like he could see someone just torturing an animal and go like, well, it's tempting to say that this animal is experiencing what we would experience when we're getting tortured. Now, we know they are, all right? Now, the levels may vary, of course, but then where do you draw that level? And who are you to decide what that level is? And on what basis do you decide a specific level? Not only that, let's say they didn't experience it the same way that we do, but they are experiencing it in a specific way. Why do you have to be so anthropocentric? Why do you think it has to be exactly the way that humans experience it? It's a very arbitrary claim to make. I don't understand his logic or lack thereof.
But like parrots and crows can basically speak, but have like no capacity for language whatsoever. And I feel like at the very
There are also a lot of human beings who don't have any capacity for language. I don't know why that matters.
I think you're presupposing a lot. Like if I ask you, like, can you point to me which parts of the brain like produce consciousness? I don't think you can do that.
Again, not like kind of. I mean, you can sort of, you can look at the parts of the brain which, and I wish I could remember which parts of the brain I'm talking about here.
It's largely associated with like prefrontal cortex communication, but there's
Yes.
even questions of like in split brain people, like are there two conscious experiences happening? Or I think there was a man that
God, like, why would you? I don't understand why some people want to make this such a complicated thing just because they don't want to admit that they hold a horrible, horrible stance. Like, what are we talking? Like, split consciousness in people with split brains. Like, animals experience sentience. They are sentient beings. They experience consciousness. We know that. We have scientific data, scientific proof that they have that. They have a central nervous system. They have these experiences. And you're here like, oh, well, you know, like in people with split brains, you know, like this and that. Like, just accept that you have a really, really bad stance. Or honestly, like, it would be more honorable for you to claim that you agree with the data that we have, with the scientific consensus, and you want to remain a person who causes an unimaginable amount of suffering on other animals. I would have more respect for you if you actually said that than getting into these weird, like, unnecessary and irrelevant arguments just to try to make a point that is based on arbitrary arguments that you're bringing up.
I'm more convinced that you're in pain. I'd be more convinced if you just like clutched your chest and started rolling around on the floor than if you calmly told me that your chest really hurt. I'd be more convinced that you're feeling pain without the language based on just the way that you behave, because I identify that behavior with the way that I behave as well. And given that we share an evolutionary trajectory, given that pain exists in human beings so that we can avoid things that are dangerous, and so it gives us a negative experience that we'd rather not be the case, I just don't see a good reason to think that this doesn't apply to other animals as well. And maybe it applies in a lesser sense. Most people, especially either if they're trying to justify our treatment of animals, or if they're like religious trying to offer theodicy against the problem of animal suffering, they sort of have to believe that it must be different in some way, it must be lesser. But to completely and utterly deny that these animals have any sense of an ability to feel pain at all just sort of doesn't seem right to me.
well, it doesn't seem right to me that I can't eat delicious cheeseburgers. That makes sense.
I understand what you're saying.
Oh God, like I don't even know what to say. I can't possibly imagine why anyone has any respect for this human being. Like I don't mean that to attack the person. This is just a YouTube video. I cannot possibly attack a person if I don't know them in person and actually know what they're like. But you certainly must have some really horrible personality or just really bad intentions to sit here, give these arbitrary arguments that make no sense, make claims that are against the consensus of the scientific community, and then say, like, oh, well, I can't have delicious cheeseburgers. Like, do you understand, like, how stupid you sound when you say something like that? And again, I say this without, like, I'm not trying to mock someone, but, like, you really must take a moment to realize how stupid you sound when you say these things. Like, if I said these things, I would want someone to message me, someone maybe who knows me, and go like, hey, like, I'm sorry, but these things you're saying, you sound stupid when you say it, like, you can't just say these things and expect people to take you seriously.
To deny that they feel pain at all. I mean, I know a lot of people who say, yeah, animals feel pain, but animal suffering doesn't really matter, or like, whatever. But to just deny that they feel it at all, I think is such a rare position that isn't any longer taken seriously by either in the sphere of moral philosophy or in the sphere of like psychology and neuroscience. I just don't think it's a held position. And I have a feeling that there's some motivated reasoning going on, that the reason why you might be so reluctant to ascribe any kind of, sentient experience to these animals, or to limit it so dramatically, is perhaps because it suits how you want to treat them, if you know what I mean.
But I mean, like, on the same end, I would look to vegans and I would say that, like, I think that you see something cute and cuddly and it produces like the correct facial expressions to feel good about it, and then you produce some motivated reasoning that essentially gives you a reason to like not hurt said cute cut.
No, absolutely not. Like, I never thought, like, when I went vegan, I didn't think pigs were cute. I still struggle to look at a pig and go like, that's a cute animal. That's my personal opinion. I can have that stance towards dogs, I can have it towards cats, I can have it through some cows, but most cows, I don't find them cute. Like, this is such a strawman argument. Veganism is not based on whether or not some animals are cute. We're not making our conclusions based on how cute an animal is. We're also not doing it because we find that cute, because obviously you can be a vegan and not find other animals cute. You can be a vegan and not even love other animals. You can be a vegan and not love other animals, because being vegan and believing in animal rights has nothing to do with love. Technically, it has nothing to do. The same way that you don't have to love human beings in order to accept the fact that human beings should have basic moral rights. That's just a fact, I mean, it's just a strawman argument. I think he's just trying to say anything now because he's getting annoyed and he doesn't like the fact that he makes no sense.
I think the problem with that feeling thing is there's a lot baked into what it means to feel something. Like, is there going to be some sensation of pain that an animal's like nervous system is capable of producing, to avoid external stimuli or whatever? Yeah, of course. Obviously, I would assume that. But it's not really...
It's not even up for assumption. It's just a fact. It's a fact. We know they have that.
If you had a human being with the brain of a pig, would that human being just have absolutely no worth to you?
I think essentially so. Yeah, I think so, yeah.
All right, so just like a small information here. Pigs are known to be as smart as a 3-year-old human being. So we're talking, hypothetically, if we had a child under the age of 3, that child is going to be less smart, let's say, or have less cognitive abilities than a pig. If he's okay to do that to pigs, it would only be consistent for him to also do that to children under the age of 3. All right. If he says no to that, he will not be able to provide a single fair argument unless if he resorts again to arbitrary claims or biological truths, which again have no place in philosophical debates.
It seems so radical to me, as I'm sure it will seem to most of the people listening, to say that there is absolutely no moral worth for these other animals, which again, if you were to reconstruct this evolutionary trajectory, you would just have to, along somewhere between Homo sapiens and like some apish ancestor. So you just sort of have to randomly say like, sorry, buddy. Like, imagine you're like God and you're deciding who gets into the afterlife, and you have this rule that human beings get to go to the afterlife. They get compensated for their suffering. All other animals do not.
Sure.
And you have this like chain of human beings. And at some point, you have to just say to this guy, like, sorry, mate, you're not coming in. And he says, but what is the difference between me and that person on the other side of the gate? And you have to say, nothing. There is literally no difference between you and that person in terms of your abilities. But look, man, I've got to draw the line somewhere. And rather than say, okay, I'm going to let you in, but we're going to slowly start like lowering the stand. No. It's like off suddenly. It's completely arbitrary, as well as being probably completely unjust and unfair in that circumstance as well.
The most irritating conversations I'll have are with people that seem to express a very emotionally strong reluctance to accept any sort of like animal killing for fun or whatever, but then they seem to be willing to eat meat, which I think that position is untenable.
All right, so let's talk about this. He claims that the conversations he has that are the most annoying are the ones where someone is against killing of other animals for fun, but then they eat meat. All right, now as animal rights activists and vegans, you know what we're talking about. You know, like people can be against bullfighting and then they're eating meat. So it makes sense for him to say that. What he's saying makes sense. However, he doesn't realize that people who engage in such conversations and actions are using the same type of discrimination that he uses towards other animals, which is speciesism, and that's based on arbitrary sentences that he's throwing around, right? They are doing that because they are against the abuse of some animal and they're okay with the abuse of other animals. And that's speciesism. Speciesism is also the basis of all of his argument. It's not the animal consciousness that matters, it's the fact that it has to be a human consciousness. And why? Because it's human. It's based on species. That's like the definition of speciesism. And so it blows my mind that he would be against people who have that stance and then use the same kind of reasoning to defend why he doesn't want other animals to have basic moral rights.
Yeah, I think if listening to me, like I don't think I would ever torture a cat or a dog. That seems really fucked up. So I mean,
why not?
Just because it makes me feel bad.
All right, so, God, like the reason why he would never torture a dog is because it would make him feel bad. Like there's literally zero consideration for other animals in his ethical stances. I really don't understand how anyone can take him seriously.
But like, what I would hope that you would agree with, if pressed hard enough, that like, it's like Lincoln said of slavery: if this is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. Like if there is this thing called sort of wrongness and badness, it seems that sort of this horror show of exploitation, mutilation, gas chambering of animals must be wrong. I guess I'm sort of surprised with how carefully we can have this really long discussion about ethics and sort of so conscious of implications of different worldviews and talking with such sort of nuance and specificity, to hear sort of be so blasé about the suffering of animals, like it just doesn't matter at all. And based on what is essentially an arbitrary like line in the sand between Homo sapiens and every single other human being that exists on the planet. It just kind of, I'm quite astonished by it, you know?
For universalization, I would hope that almost every other group of humans can reciprocate said values to me. Animals aren't capable of doing this either. They don't have even concepts of moral systems or ethical systems.
All right, so now he's talking about the fact that other animals cannot show the same type of values and responsibilities towards him, but neither can specific humans, like children can't do that. Those with mental disabilities can't do that. Again, it's not really an argument.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't really need to eat animals at all to survive, right? Like, so what? There's not. Also, something I'm curious for you, like when an animal kills and tortures another animal, would you say that like a wrong has been committed there? Do you consider that wrong? So when we see like groups of lions like catching and torturing and killing an animal, is there like a wrong action committed there, or? No,
I'd say it's bad but not wrong.
Would you agree with me that there should be a vegan imperative to genocide all cats on the planet?
I'm not sure about that. No, because
I feel like keeping a cat as a house pet is like a necessarily evil thing if you are vegan. Like I don't know how you could ever live with having an obligate carnivore as an animal that for recreation. Like you should
Oh,
reduce
sorry.
it.
I thought you were just talking about like pet ownership, the ethics.
Oh, no,
generally.
not
You're
pet
talking about the
ownership,
fact.
All right, so when it comes to the topic of keeping an obligate carnivore as a pet, like, should there be vegan imperative to genocide all cats? No, there shouldn't. The same way that there shouldn't be a vegan imperative to genocide all human beings. Because the thing is, in the case of a cat, the cat does not really have another option. Now, I do want to quickly say that there are actually plant-based foods that are made for cats, and they are obviously clinically tested and approved by all the organizations necessary before being put in the market, otherwise it would be illegal. But in the case of a cat, as he said, a cat is an obligate carnivore, so it wouldn't make any sense. Like, if it would be okay to genocide obligate carnivores because they are harming other animals, then what would that say about what we should do to human beings who are not obligate carnivores, who don't have to eat meat to survive, and are harming all these other animals, you know? So I think, again, he's always trying to find loopholes in veganism and like gotcha moments, but you know what? There's actually another solution that's coming up, which is lab-grown meat to be used as pet food. So that's gonna take away this question, and let's see if he's gonna be continuing throwing around this like random stupid idea about genociding all cats if you're vegan.
Arguably, if you're like breeding these cats into existence for the purposes of having a pet, which is going to require you to buy animal products to feed them, that would be wrong on a vegan worldview. But most vegans think that, breeding animals into existence for pet ownership is wrong anyway, and that you should favor sort of rescue animals or...
Yeah, maybe I'd have to think about that more. I just like to tell vegans to kill their cats, so.
Yeah, interested to hear what our collective listeners have to say about the matter.
Probably going to be really mad, but I will
Hicks, you make no sense.
say, I think the worst people, I think I'm the second worst people. I think the worst people are people that seem to be gravely concerned with animal suffering that have no problem eating meat products. I think you have to pick one side of the fence there.
Yeah, you think you are not in the same category, but the reasoning that they use is the same one that you use. So it doesn't really make much of a difference.
So,
Sure. Yeah, well, hey, if there's ever like a particular applied or any non-meta fucking moral question that comes up, yeah, if you ever want to chop shop again or...
All right, so the painful part is over. We've heard enough of this word salad. I'm still shocked that this guy has such a big platform and he uses it, for several reasons. Animal rights is not the main thing he talks about, but I'm talking about Destiny, by the way. But then when he does talk about veganism and animal rights, he uses these horrible arguments, arbitrary, random, words that he's throwing, his contradictions within his own stances is also weird. He uses a lot of like logical fallacies, and for some reason it really annoys me when someone who seems to be otherwise smart and aware tries so hardly to do anything but accept the moral imperative that comes with how we deal with other animals. If you believe in human rights, you believe in animal rights. There's no way around it. You can't believe in one and not the other without making an arbitrary statement. They belong to this species or that species, that's speciesism. That's an arbitrary statement as well. It's a biological truth, which is an arbitrary statement, and a very dangerous one if we're gonna use them to decide who gets rights or not. So that's it for today's video. Today turned out to be longer than I expected, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you want me to react to any other videos such as this one, please make sure to leave a comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe. For those of you who want to support these videos, feel free to check out my website. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video.